My family called me a useless failure at Thanksgiving dinner. They told me to go live on the streets. What they didn't know was that I was the one who would soon own theirs. If you've ever been told you'd never amount to anything by the people who were supposed to believe in you the most, hit that like button. And if you love stories where the quiet, overlooked one finally makes the whole rotten table shake, subscribe. You're not going to want to miss a single second of this. The wound for me wasn't a single cut. It was a lifetime of paper cuts, administered with a smile, in our beautiful, sun-drenched, picture-perfect home. I'm Zoe Hartman, and for as long as I can remember, I existed in the soft focus background of my family's masterpiece. The star of that masterpiece was, and always would be, my younger sister, Crystal. Crystal was the golden child, not just in the cliché way, but in a way that felt like a fundamental law of our universe. The sun rose in the east, water was wet, and Crystal was exceptional. Her laughter was the soundtrack of our home. Her achievements were the artwork on the fridge. Her very presence was a beam of light my parents would physically turn towards like sunflowers. And I was the stagehand. Quiet, necessary in a vague way, but utterly invisible once the curtain went up. I remember being 7, painstakingly building a detailed diorama of the solar system for a school project, mixing paints to get the rings of Saturn just right. My father glanced at it, gave a distracted, "That's nice, honey," and then his entire being lit up as 4-year-old Crystal stumbled into the room wearing a tutu over her pajamas. "Look at our little ballerina," he'd boomed, sweeping her up. My diorama was left on the table, a tiny, meticulous universe utterly eclipsed. That was the pattern. My A's in math were met with a "good job," while Crystal's participation ribbon in a soccer camp she hated was framed. My quiet request for a coding summer camp was a waste of money for a hobby, while Crystal's whimsical desire for horseback riding lessons was an investment in her grace and poise. My parents spoke of her future as a thrilling novel they couldn't wait to read. My future was a footnote they occasionally skimmed. So I stopped trying to read my lines from their script. I retreated, not into rebellion, but into a world they couldn't see and wouldn't understand, the digital world. While Crystal was at cheerleading practice and my parents were at her competitions, I was in my room, the blue glow of my secondhand laptop my only companion. I taught myself to code, not from fancy courses, but from dusty library books and cryptic online forums. I built clunky websites, then less clunky ones. I learned about servers, databases, cybersecurity. It wasn't a hobby. It was an escape hatch I was building, bolt by digital bolt. By the time I was in college, I was running a small but profitable freelance business fixing back-end issues for local companies. I paid my own tuition. I bought my own groceries. My calls home were brief, polite updates met with the usual distracted warmth. "That's great, Zoe. Listen, Crystal made the dean's list, and she's dating a pre-med student." Click. The escape hatch worked. By 25, I had co-founded a cloud security firm with 2 people I met online, brilliant minds who saw my work, not my family's narrative. By 30, we sold that company. My share was life-changing. By 30, I was consulting, investing, building again. My annual income was a number so absurd I sometimes had to check my bank statements to believe it. $25 million. I lived in a beautiful, understated loft in Seattle. I had peace. I had freedom. I had a life entirely of my own making. And my family had no idea. Not a clue. Why would they? They never asked. When I visited, my mother would fuss about my plain clothes, expensive, minimalist cashmere coat, and suggest I get a real job with benefits. My father would ask if I was still fiddling with those computers, and then launch into a detailed analysis of Crystal's latest venture, a boutique she wanted to open. It would be called Crystal's Closet. It would be, according to my father, a surefire success. They needed investors, of course. The conversation would inevitably drift my way, a fog of unspoken expectation. I'd change the subject. The disconnect was so vast that it was almost funny. Almost. There's a special kind of loneliness that comes from succeeding wildly in a vacuum, from building skyscrapers no one in your hometown even notices. I told myself I didn't need their validation, but a tiny, wounded part of me, the 7-year-old with the solar system, still hoped that one day they'd look, really look. That hope died on Thanksgiving. I flew back to my hometown in Ohio, a place that still felt like a set where I'd forgotten my lines. The house was warm, smelling of rosemary turkey and pumpkin pie. Crystal held court, showing off an enormous diamond engagement ring from her pre-med boyfriend, now a doctor. The air was thick with congratulations, with toasts to her future, with the palpable, glowing satisfaction of my parents. I was happy for her, genuinely, but as always, I was a ghost at the feast. The tipping point came after dinner. We were in the living room, surrounded by the wreckage of a meal I'd mostly cooked while my mother directed Crystal on centerpiece arrangement. My father, emboldened by scotch and familial triumph, decided it was time for a real talk with me. "Zoe," he began, in that tone that always made my stomach drop. It was his disappointed patriarch voice. "We need to talk about your situation." "My situation?" I asked, setting down my wineglass. "This Seattle fantasy," my mother chimed in, not unkindly, but with the exasperation of someone dealing with a stubborn child. "I'm not couch surfing, Mom. I own my place. My work is going very well," I said, my voice calm, trying to project a certainty I suddenly didn't feel. Crystal let out a little sigh, a sound of long-suffering sisterly concern. "Zoe, it's okay to admit you're struggling. Maybe Derek knows someone at the hospital who needs IT help. It'll be stable." The condescension was a physical slap. I looked at my father. His face was a mask of stern disappointment. "Stable is the key word, Zoe. This, whatever it is you're doing, it's not a career. It's a dead end. You're drifting. You're a..." He searched for the word, and when he found it, he delivered it with the force of a judge pronouncing a sentence. "You're a useless failure." The room went silent, save for the crackle of the fireplace. Useless failure. The words hung in the air, toxic and final. My mother didn't contradict him. She looked at her hands. Crystal studied her diamond ring, a faint, uncomfortable smile on her lips. My father wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his eyes hard. "Zoe, you can't keep floating around like this. If this Seattle nonsense doesn't work out, don't come crying to us. You can go live on the streets for all I care. Maybe that'll finally knock some sense into you." There it was, the ultimate dismissal. Not just an insult, but a revocation of sanctuary. In his eyes, I was already homeless. A strange, cold clarity washed over me. The heat of shame, the sting of tears, they just evaporated. In that place was a hollow, silent understanding. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was who they were. They had chosen their reality, and in it, I was a failure. My actual reality, my success, my peace, my entire life, was irrelevant to them. It didn't compute. So I stopped trying to read my lines from their script. I retreated. Not into rebellion, but into a world they couldn't see and wouldn't understand. The digital world. While Crystal was at cheerleading practice and my parents were at her competitions, I was in my room, the blue glow of my secondhand laptop my only companion. I taught myself to code, not from fancy courses, but from dusty library books and cryptic online forums. I built clunky websites, then less clunky ones. I learned about servers, databases, cybersecurity. It wasn't a hobby. It was an escape hatch I was building, bolt by digital bolt. By the time I was in college, I was running a small but profitable freelance business fixing back-end issues for local companies. I paid my own tuition. I bought my own groceries. My calls home were brief, polite updates met with the usual distracted warmth. "That's great, Zoe. Listen, Crystal made the dean's list, and she's dating a pre-med student." Click. The escape hatch worked. By 25, I had co-founded a cloud security firm with 2 people I met online, brilliant minds who saw my work, not my family's narrative. By 30, we sold that company. My share was life-changing. By 30, I was consulting, investing, building again. My annual income was a number so absurd I sometimes had to check my bank statements to believe it. $25 million. I lived in a beautiful, understated loft in Seattle. I had peace, I had freedom, I had a life entirely of my own making. And my family had no idea. Not a clue. Why would they? They never asked. When I visited, my mother would fuss about my plain clothes, expensive, minimalist cashmere coat, and suggest I get a real job with benefits. My father would ask if I was still fiddling with those computers, and then launch into a detailed analysis of Crystal's latest venture, a boutique she wanted to open. It would be called Crystal's Closet. It would be, according to my father, a surefire success. They needed investors, of course. The conversation would inevitably drift my way, a fog of unspoken expectation. I'd change the subject. The disconnect was so vast, it was almost funny. Almost. There's a special kind of loneliness that comes from succeeding wildly in a vacuum, from building skyscrapers no one in your hometown even notices. I told myself I didn't need their validation, but a tiny wounded part of me, the 7-year-old with the solar system, still hoped that one day they'd look, really look. That hope died on Thanksgiving. I flew back to my hometown in Ohio, a place that still felt like a set where I'd forgotten my lines. The house was warm, smelling of rosemary turkey and pumpkin pie. Crystal held court, showing off an enormous diamond engagement ring from her pre-med boyfriend, now a doctor. The air was thick with congratulations, with toasts to her future, with the palpable, glowing satisfaction of my parents. I was happy for her, genuinely, but as always, I was a ghost at the feast. The tipping point came after dinner. We were in the living room, surrounded by the wreckage of a meal I'd mostly cooked while my mother directed Crystal on centerpiece arrangement. My father, emboldened by scotch and familial triumph, decided it was time for a real talk with me. "Zoe," he began, in that tone that always made my stomach drop. It was his disappointed patriarch voice. "We need to talk about your situation." "My situation?" I asked, setting down my wine glass. "This Seattle fantasy," my mother chimed in, not unkindly, but with the exasperation of someone dealing with a stubborn child. "Couch surfing with friends, doing odd computer jobs. You're 30 years old. It's time to grow up." I blinked. Couch surfing? Odd jobs? Where was this coming from? I realized then that my vague answers, my deflection about my work, had created a vacuum, and in that vacuum they had constructed a narrative that fit their worldview. Zoe, the unstable, unambitious one, was barely scraping by. "I'm not couch surfing, Mom. I own my place. My work is going very well," I said, my voice calm, trying to project a certainty I suddenly didn't feel. Crystal let out a little sigh, a sound of long-suffering, sisterly concern. "Zoe, it's okay to admit you're struggling. Maybe Derek knows someone at the hospital who needs IT help. It'd be stable." The condescension was a physical slap. I looked at my father. His face was a mask of stern disappointment. "Stable is the key word, Zoe. This, whatever it is you're doing, it's not a career, it's a dead end. You're drifting. You're a..." He searched for the word, and when he found it, he delivered it with the force of a judge pronouncing a sentence. "You're a useless failure." The room went silent, save for the crackle of the fireplace. Useless failure. The words hung in the air, toxic and final. My mother didn't contradict him. She looked at her hands. Crystal studied her diamond ring, a faint, uncomfortable smile on her lips. My father wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his eyes hard. "You can't keep floating around like this. If this Seattle nonsense doesn't work out, don't come crying to us. You can go live on the streets for all I care. Maybe that'll finally knock some sense into you." There it was, the ultimate dismissal. Not just an insult, but a revocation of sanctuary. In his eyes, I was already homeless. A strange, cold clarity washed over me. The heat of shame, the sting of tears, they just evaporated. In their place was a hollow, silent understanding. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was who they were. They had chosen their reality, and in it, I was a failure. My actual reality, my success, my peace, my entire life was irrelevant to them. It didn't compute. I stood up. My hands weren't shaking. My voice was eerily steady. "Thank you for dinner," I said. I didn't look at any of them. I walked to the hall closet, retrieved my coat and bag, and let myself out into the crisp November night. I didn't slam the door. The click of the latch behind me was quieter, more final. The drive to the airport hotel was a blur. I felt numb, but my mind was a hive of furious, crystalline activity. I replayed the scene, not with hurt, but with a forensic detachment. Their faces, their silence, the utter conviction in my father's voice. Useless failure. The phrase looped, but now it sounded absurd, like nonsense words. I thought the silence after leaving would be peaceful. It wasn't. It was a vacuum, and in that vacuum a new, more insidious hurt began to grow, because a week later I found out the betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was a text from an old high school friend, Sarah. It was hesitant, awkward. "Hey Zoe, heard you were back in town for Thanksgiving. My mom ran into your mom at the grocery. She said you're having a really tough time in Seattle, that you're basically homeless and couch surfing. I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do?" My blood, which had been ice cold, suddenly ignited. She wasn't just thinking it. She was telling people, spreading it as gossip, painting a pathetic picture of me to the entire town. My humiliation was now her social currency, a little sob story to make her look like a concerned mother with a wayward child. I stared at my phone screen in the serene quiet of my Seattle loft, with its panoramic view of the Sound. The disconnect was so violent it made me dizzy. I typed back, my fingers stiff. "I'm fine, Sarah. More than fine. My mom is misinformed. Thanks for checking." I thought that was the bottom, the public slander, the lie they preferred to the truth. I was wrong. The bottom was still far below, and I was about to fall all the way to it. The email arrived 2 days before Christmas. The subject line was innocuous. "Urgent matter regarding loan guarantee, Hartman Family Trust." It was from a law firm in Ohio, one I'd never heard of. My first thought was spam. My second was some kind of mistake.
I opened it. "Dear Miss Hartman, we are writing on behalf of First Regional Bank of Ohio regarding a commercial renovation loan in the amount of $400,000 issued to the Hartman Family Trust on June 15th of this year. Our records indicate you are a personal guarantor for this loan. The loan is now 45 days in arrears. Please contact us immediately to discuss payment arrangements to avoid formal default proceedings, which would negatively impact your credit." My breath left my body in a rush. I read it again and again. $400,000. Loan guarantor. Hartman Family Trust. June. June. I had been in Tuscany in June. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't guaranteed anything. A cold, sick dread began to pool in my stomach. I forwarded the email to my attorney, Miranda, with 2 words. "What is this?" Miranda, who was sharp as a scalpel and had seen everything, called me within 20 minutes. "Zoe, talk to me. Have you ever co-signed a loan for your parents?" "Never," I said, my voice tight. "I don't even know what this Hartman Family Trust is." "Okay," she said, and I could hear the gears turning in her head. "I'll reach out to the law firm, request all documentation. Don't respond to them. Don't acknowledge anything." The waiting was agony. It was the Christmas season, and my loft was decorated with tasteful, minimalist lights, but it felt like a stage set. The joy, the peace I'd built for myself felt paper thin, threatened by this thing from Ohio, this ghost of my family's making. Miranda's next call came on a gray, rainy Seattle afternoon. Her voice was calm, professional, but I could hear the edge in it, the lawyerly equivalent of, "You are not going to believe this." "I have the documents," she said, "the loan application, the guarantor form, everything. Zoe, your signature is on the personal guarantee. It's notarized." "It's a forgery," I whispered, the room tilting slightly. "I'm almost certain it is," Miranda replied, "but it's a good one. The notary stamp is from a mobile notary service in your hometown. The dates line up with when you were in Italy. We can subpoena the notary's log, get their testimony, but it's going to be a fight. More importantly, I dug into the loan purpose. It was ostensibly for extensive renovations and business capital for the family home and an attached commercial property. Crystal's boutique, I said, the pieces slamming together with a terrible, logical clarity. The boutique she'd talked about for years, the one that needed investors. They hadn't just asked me, they had used me. They'd taken my name, my invisible financial weight, and they'd used it as a safety net without my consent. They'd committed felony forgery and bank fraud, and then, when they couldn't keep up the payments, they let it slide toward default, with my name attached. The betrayal was no longer emotional. It was financial. It was legal. It was a landmine they had planted in my life and then walked away from. "What are the ramifications if it defaults?" I asked, my voice now as cold as the rain outside. "For you, as the alleged guarantor, the bank would come after you for the full $400,000 plus penalties and legal fees. They'd sue, they'd get a judgment, they could lien your assets here in Seattle. It would be a massive hit to your credit, a long, ugly, expensive legal battle to prove the forgery, even though we'd win eventually. The stress, the cost, the publicity, it's a nightmare scenario." I closed my eyes. The image of my father at Thanksgiving telling his useless failure of a daughter to go live on the streets flashed behind my eyelids. He said that while he was sitting in a house partly renovated with a loan he'd fraudulently tied to my name. He said that while my sister's dream boutique was being funded by my stolen credibility. The numbness was gone. In its place was a rage so pure, so focused, it was like a white-hot laser. But alongside the rage was that same cold clarity. This wasn't about screaming or confronting them. That would give them drama, a role to play, the victim, the misunderstood parents, the shocked sister. No, they'd made it financial. They'd made it legal. So that's exactly how I would answer. I took a deep, shuddering breath. "Miranda," I said, my voice steady, "I don't want to just defend myself. I want to turn this back on them, completely. What are our options?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear Miranda's smile, the predatory gleam in her eye. She loved a good puzzle, especially when the pieces were rotten. "Well," she said slowly, "the bank wants their money. They don't care who pays. If the trust defaults, the bank will likely sell the debt to a collections agency for pennies on the dollar to recoup something. That agency would then aggressively pursue the guarantor, you, and the trust assets. What if I said, the idea forming as I spoke, we positioned ourselves to be that collections agency?" The silence this time was longer, filled with the hum of possibility. "You want to buy the debt," Miranda stated. "If they default," I said, "I want to own it. Every last cent of it. I want to own the loan, and by extension, I want to own the leverage over everything it's tied to. The house, the boutique." "That is aggressive," Miranda said, and I could hear the admiration in her tone. "And legally complex. We'd need to set up a corporate entity, a debt acquisition vehicle. We'd need to move quietly through intermediaries so the bank and your family never know it's you until the moment we choose. And we have to let them default. We can't tip them off or help them." "Let them default," I repeated. A directive, a plan, the first step on a new path. "What do we need to do?" "First," Miranda said, her voice all business now, "we formally dispute the guarantor's signature. We send a cease and desist, threaten legal action for forgery and fraud against the bank if they pursue you. That will make them very nervous about the validity of their collateral. They'll put intense pressure on the Hartman Trust to pay. Second, we quietly create our shell company. Third, we wait. The loan is already in arrears. With the bank spooked, they won't be generous. They'll accelerate the default process." And my family? I asked, though I already knew the answer. They'll panic, Miranda said simply. They've been using your phantom success as collateral. Once the bank tells them that collateral is contested and legally toxic, they have nothing. No way to refinance, no other assets. They'll scramble. They'll probably come to you with some sob story, asking for a loan to fix the mess they made. A grim smile touched my lips. And I'll say no. You'll say nothing, Miranda corrected. You'll be unreachable. You're done being their safety net, Zoe. You're about to become the storm. I hung up the phone and walked to my floor-to-ceiling window. The lights of Seattle were starting to twinkle in the winter dusk. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt solid, real. I had a purpose. The game was on, and they had no idea they were already playing on my board.
The silence after my call with Miranda wasn't peaceful. It was the tense, humming quiet of a siege. I was in my fortress in Seattle, but my mind was back in Ohio, in that picture-perfect house, watching the invisible timer tick down on their fraud. Miranda moved with terrifying efficiency. A formal, lethally worded letter went out to the bank's legal department with copies to the original loan officer and the bank's compliance head. It cited specific statutes for forgery, fraud, and fraudulent inducement. It included a sworn affidavit from me stating I was in Italy on the date of the notarization, supported by passport stamps and hotel receipts Miranda had me dig up. It didn't scream. It whispered in crisp legalese that if they pursued me for a single cent, we would not only defend ourselves, we would sue them for gross negligence in their due diligence, seeking damages that would make their $400,000 loan look like a rounding error. The effect was immediate, and exactly as Miranda predicted. My phone began to ring. Not from numbers I recognized at first. Area code 216, Cleveland. Then the main line of my father's architecture firm, then my mother's cell, then Crystal's. They called in waves, a desperate staccato rhythm against the quiet of my life. I let every single one go to voicemail. The first voicemail was from my father. His voice was strained, trying for his usual paternal authority but cracking around the edges. "Zoe, it's Dad. We need to talk. The bank is being unreasonable about the loan. There's been some kind of misunderstanding. Call me back. It's important." Misunderstanding. The word was a tiny spark that ignited a cold fire in my chest. A misunderstanding was putting salt instead of sugar in a recipe. This was felony forgery. My mother's message was next, a masterpiece of passive-aggressive concern. "Honey, it's Mom. Your father is very upset. The bank is threatening us over that silly loan for Crystal's shop. I don't understand all the legal nonsense, but they mentioned your name. I'm sure you can just clear this up with a phone call. You were always so good with paperwork. Please call us back, sweetie. We're family." Silly loan. Paperwork. She made it sound like a misplaced permission slip. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it made me grip the edge of my kitchen counter until my knuckles turned white. I played it again, listening not to the words, but to the tone, the unshakable belief that my role was to clean up their messes quietly and without complaint. Crystal's message was a tearful performance. "Zoe, oh my God, it's a nightmare. The bank says they're going to call the loan. They're going to take the boutique. All my inventory is ordered, the launch party is planned. Derek's parents are going to be so embarrassed. You have to help. You have to. I know we've had our differences, but you can't let them destroy my dream. Just talk to the bank, okay? Tell them it's fine." Our differences. That's what she called a lifetime of systemic favoritism culminating in them committing a crime in my name. Her dream, funded by a lie, with my future as the collateral they were willing to burn. I saved the messages, not out of sentiment, but as evidence, an audio log of their escalating panic, their complete lack of accountability, their unwavering entitlement to my rescue. Miranda had warned me this would happen. "They will try every emotional lever they have," she'd said.
Guilt, obligation, family duty, crisis. Your job is to be a black hole. No light, no sound, no response escapes. It will drive them insane, and it will give us the time and space we need. Being a black hole was harder than I thought. Every ignored call was a small battle. Every deleted text, they'd moved on to pleading, then angry, then vaguely threatening texts, was an act of will. The old programming, the decades of conditioning to jump when they said jump, to soothe when they were upset, was a live wire in my nervous system. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., my heart pounding, my brain replaying my father's useless failure line over Crystal's sobs. In the dark, the doubts would creep in. Was I being cruel? Was this too far? Maybe I should just pay it, make it go away, and then cut them off. Buy my peace. But then I'd remember the email from the law firm, the cold, clinical language about my credit being destroyed. I'd picture a process server showing up at my loft. I'd imagine the hours, the thousands in legal fees, the stain on my professional reputation fighting a lawsuit I never asked for. They hadn't just betrayed me, they'd built a trap for me and then walked away, leaving me to step into it. No, this wasn't cruelty, this was self-preservation. They'd chosen this battlefield. I was just finally showing up for the fight. While my family spiraled, Miranda's parallel operation moved forward with glacial, precise force. She set up an LLC called Acheron Capital Partners. The name was her idea. Acheron, the river of woe in Greek mythology, the boundary between the world and the underworld. It was fitting. We were about to become the ferrymen. Through a series of anonymous intermediaries, Acheron Capital began expressing interest to the bank in purchasing distressed commercial debt portfolios. We were a speck in a large market, invisible. Miranda, through a trusted associate playing the role of Acheron's managing director, started a slow, casual dance with the bank's head of distressed assets. The Hartman Family Trust loan was, as Miranda predicted, a hot potato the bank was desperate to get rid of. Our forgery claim had made it radioactive. They couldn't sell it easily to a normal collections agency without disclosing the dispute, which would crater its value. But a vague, out-of-state investment firm looking to buy a bundle of iffy loans for a steep discount, that was a different story. The bank could bury the problematic Hartman loan in a pool of a dozen others, a single rotten apple in a bruised barrel. They just wanted it off their books. The negotiations took weeks, agonizing, silent weeks, where my only updates were from Miranda, delivered in her cool, analytical way. The bank is countering. They're asking for more due diligence on the pooled assets. We've structured the offer to be all cash, immediate close. That's the golden ticket for them. During this time, the calls from Ohio stopped. The silence from my family was more unnerving than the barrage. It felt like the calm before an earthquake. I knew they were scheming, scrambling. I just didn't know how. I found out through a landmine disguised as a Christmas card. It arrived a few days before New Year's, amidst a pile of tasteful, minimalist cards from friends and colleagues. The envelope was my mother's familiar looping script. My stomach clenched. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity and a healthy dose of paranoia got the better of me. Inside wasn't a card. It was a photocopy of a family photo from years ago, all of us smiling awkwardly in matching sweaters. Paperclipped to it was a single handwritten note on my mother's floral stationery. "Zoe, we miss you. We're so worried. The bank is being terrible. They've given us a final deadline, January 15th. If we don't pay the arrears and get back on schedule, they will foreclose on the house and Crystal's boutique. We will lose everything. Your father's blood pressure is dangerously high. Crystal is sick with worry. We know you're struggling in Seattle, but surely you have some savings. Could you loan us $50,000 to get us over this hump? It would be a loan, of course. We'd pay you back. Think of it as an investment in your sister's future. We are your family. Please, don't let us drown. Love, Mom." I read it 3 times. Then I laughed, a short, sharp, bitter sound that echoed in my quiet living room.
We know you're struggling in Seattle. The lie they preferred, the lie they needed to be true to make this request seem reasonable. They were asking the homeless, couch-surfing failure for $50,000. The irony was so thick I could taste it, metallic and sour. Think of it as an investment in your sister's future. Not our family, not our home. Crystal's future. Always Crystal's future. My future was just a piggy bank to be smashed open for hers. Don't let us drown. They were in the water all right, but they were the ones who jumped off the ship holding the anchor they'd tied around my neck. This note wasn't a plea, it was a confession. It confirmed everything. The deadline, the consequences, their utter lack of a plan B, and their unwavering belief that I existed to be their plan B. I took a picture of the note and the photo and texted it to Miranda. The pressure campaign has moved to snail mail. They're asking for $50K. Her reply was instant. Do not respond. This is perfect. It shows their state of mind. Keep it. The deadline is useful intel. January 15th, D-Day. On January 10th, Miranda called, her voice vibrating with a suppressed energy I'd never heard before. It's done. Acheron Capital just closed. We own the debt, the entire pool. The Hartman Family Trust loan is now the property of an entity you control. A strange sensation washed over me, a mix of vertigo and immense solid power. So, it's mine? The $400,000 they owe? It's yours, she confirmed. And more importantly, you own all the rights that come with it. The right to demand full payment, the right to foreclose on the collateral, which is the house and the commercial property that houses Crystal's closet, the right to set new terms. You are, for all intents and purposes, their bank, and they are in severe default. The plan was crystallizing. We had the leverage, now we needed the stage. What's the next move? I asked, my own voice sounding strange to me. We wait for the 15th to pass, let the official default happen on the bank's books. Then, Acheron's management will make first contact. Standard procedure. A letter from our new collections attorney, a Mr. Eris Thorne, that's my guy, informing them of the transfer of the debt and demanding immediate payment in full. It will be brutal. Legalese, no room for negotiation. It will scare the hell out of them. And then, I prompted, knowing there was more. And then, Miranda said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, the representative will be you. The representative will be you, she confirmed, but not as Zoe Hartman, the daughter, as Zoe Hartman, the principal of Acheron Capital Partners. You will walk into that room not as family, but as the holder of their debt. You will be the consequence of their actions, the final, unavoidable audit. The sheer theatrical justice of it took my breath away. They had lived in a fantasy where I was a failure, and they were entitled to my unseen success. I was about to bring both realities crashing together in one room. The next few days were a study in surreal duality. I was going about my life in Seattle, meetings with tech founders, quiet dinners, workouts along the waterfront, while mentally rehearsing for a confrontation that felt like it belonged in a movie. I worked with Miranda on the script. We outlined the talking points, the legal boundaries, the non-negotiable terms. We built a wall of facts and legalities that their emotions couldn't scale. January 15th came and went. I heard nothing, but I could feel the shockwave emanating from Ohio. The axe had fallen. On January 18th, as Miranda predicted, my phone lit up with a new area code, a Columbus number. I let it go to voicemail. It was a man's voice, crisp, professional, and cold. This is Eris Thorne of Thorne & Associates, representing Acheron Capital Partners. For the Hartman Family Trust, this message constitutes formal notice of the acceleration of your loan, number FC7742. All outstanding principal and interest is now due in full. You have 10 business days to remit payment to the address listed in the formal correspondence you will receive. Failure to do so will result in immediate initiation of foreclosure on all pledged collateral. This matter is not open for discussion. Any inquiries must be in writing. It was a thing of beauty, a guillotine blade in audio form.
The fallout was immediate and volcanic. My phone exploded. This time, the messages weren't pleading, they were frantic, terrified, laced with a new kind of rage, the rage of the cornered. My father, voice shaking with a fury I'd never heard before. "Zoe, what the hell have you done? Did you talk to some loan shark, some vulture? We got a letter from some Acheron. They're going to take the house. Your mother is hysterical. Call me right now." My mother sobbing openly. "They're going to put us out on the street. Is this what you wanted? To make us homeless? After everything we've done for you? How could you be so heartless?" Crystal shrieking. "My boutique! They're going to lock the doors! My entire life is in there! You selfish bitch! You did this! You've always been jealous! You're trying to ruin my life!" I listened to them all, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. The projection was breathtaking. I did this? I was the villain? They had forged my name, stolen my financial identity, and when their scheme collapsed, they blamed me for not lying down and letting them drive over me. The final message was from my father again that night. The fury had burned out, replaced with a hollow, exhausted fear. It was this message that truly signaled the end of their old world. "Zoe, please, please, this company, Acheron, they're monsters. They won't talk to us. The lawyer just hangs up. We got a call from their office. They agreed to a meeting, one meeting, with a representative. It's our only chance. It's on Friday at the Capitol Grill in Columbus, 7 p.m. We have to be there. I need you to come. You're good with numbers, with this business stuff. You could help us prepare. Talk to this person. Make them see reason. Please, Zoe, I'm asking you, as your father, help us." The manipulation was so transparent it was almost pathetic. The command disguised as a plea, the sudden convenient recognition of my skills, good with numbers, with this business stuff, now that they needed them, the invocation of fatherhood, the ultimate guilt card. He had no idea he was inviting the wolf to the meeting he thought was for the sheep. I didn't respond, but I called Miranda. "I took the bait," I said, my voice steady. "The meeting is set. Friday, the Capitol Grill." "Perfect," she replied. "Mr. Thorne will confirm the meeting with them tomorrow, stating the Acheron representative will be there. He will not give a name. Let them sweat. Let them prepare their little presentation. Are you ready?" I looked out at the dark water of the Sound, reflecting the city lights. I thought of the 7-year-old with her solar system. I thought of the 30-year-old being told she was a useless failure. I thought of the forged signature, the lying gossip, the entitled demand for $50,000 from my struggling self. I felt a calm settle over me, deeper than any I'd ever known. This wasn't rage anymore. It was resolution. "I've been ready for 30 years, I said. "I'll fly in Thursday."
The flight to Columbus was an exercise in surreal detachment. I sat in the first-class cabin, the hum of the engines a dull roar in my ears, sipping sparkling water and watching the patchwork of America slide by beneath me. It felt like I was traveling to another dimension, not just another state. In my carry-on was a slim leather portfolio containing the only documents I needed: the Acheron Capital Formation Papers listing me as principal, the debt purchase agreement highlighting the Hartman Trust loan, and a single, stark spreadsheet Miranda had prepared. It outlined in brutal, unemotional columns the two options I would present. Option A, full repayment of the $400,000 principal plus accrued interest and penalties, now ballooned to nearly $435,000, within 30 days. Option B, voluntary surrender of the collateral properties, the house and the boutique, in lieu of foreclosure, with a potential shortfall judgment for any remaining balance. There was no option C, not from Acheron Capital. But in my mind, there was a Zoe Hartman option C, the one I would offer not as a financier, but as the ghost they'd created, the one that would look like mercy but would feel to them like a life sentence. Miranda had booked me a suite at a sleek, anonymous downtown hotel. the kind with floor-to-ceiling windows and a minibar stocked with artisanal bitters. It was a far cry from the chintz and doilies aesthetic of my parents' home. I stood at the window that first night, Thursday night, looking out at the familiar yet foreign skyline of my home state's capital. The anxiety I'd expected, the shaking hands, the nausea, was absent. In its place was a hyper-focused calm, the kind I got before a major product launch or a high-stakes negotiation. This was just another deal, the most personal deal of my life, but a deal nonetheless. My phone, set to Do Not Disturb except for Miranda and my attorney on the ground, Eris Thorne, buzzed once. It was a text from an unknown number with a 614 area code. "Zoe, it's Derek, Crystal's fiancé. Look, I know things are messed up. They're in a total panic over this Acheron thing. They're saying you might be involved somehow. That's crazy, right? Anyway, they're meeting with the money people tomorrow night. Your dad asked me to come for moral support. It's a mess. Just, if you know anything, can you give me a heads up? I don't want my parents dragged into this." I stared at the message. Derek, the pre-med turned doctor, the golden boy. Even his concern was self-serving, my parents. He was sniffing around the perimeter trying to protect his family's social standing from the Hartman contagion. I felt a flicker of pity for him, tethered to this sinking ship, but pity was a luxury I couldn't afford. He'd chosen his side by putting that ring on Crystal's finger. I didn't reply. Let him sweat, too. The planning with Miranda and Eris Thorne was meticulous, almost military. Eris was exactly as his name sounded, a man in his 50s with a voice like gravel rolling downhill and a demeanor that could frost glass. We had a conference call from my hotel room. "The meeting is confirmed for 7 p.m. in the private dining room, the boardroom," Eris rumbled. "I've informed the Hartman Trust that a principal from Acheron will attend. I did not provide a name or gender. I've stressed this is a courtesy, not a negotiation. They have requested your father, mother, and sister Crystal be present, along with a family advisor, likely the fiancé. I've allowed it." "Good," I said. "I want them all there. I want every witness." "Your arrival," Miranda cut in, her voice crisp through the speaker. "You should not arrive with them. Be there first. Eris, you'll be there to greet them, escort them in. Zoe will already be seated, perhaps with her back to the door initially. Let them get settled, let them start their performance for the faceless representative. Then you turn around." The stage direction was chilling. I could picture it. The hushed, wood-paneled room, the nervous small talk, my father in his one good suit, my mother wearing her string of pearls, Crystal with her practiced, fragile smile, all of them facing the empty seat at the head of the table, waiting for the villain to arrive. And then the villain turns around, and she has my face. "What's the primary psychological goal here?" Eris asked, not unkindly. He was a strategist. He needed to understand the endgame to play his part. "The goal is not to humiliate, though that would be an undeniable byproduct. The goal is to make the abstraction real. They committed fraud against a concept, Zoe's credit, Zoe's future. I need them to see in one irreversible moment that the concept is a person who now holds the power. The shock is the delivery mechanism for the terms. They need to be too stunned to think, so they can only listen." "Understood," Eris said. "I will handle the legal formalities. You handle the familial revelations." We went over the contingencies. What if my father had a literal heart attack? We had the hotel concierge aware a doctor might be needed and 911 on speed dial. What if they became violent? Eris was a large man and a discreet security person would be stationed outside the door. What if they simply got up and walked out? Eris would calmly inform them that leaving would be construed as a rejection of the settlement offer, and foreclosure filings would be submitted to the county courthouse first thing Monday morning. We planned for everything, except for my own emotions, because I still wasn't sure what they would be. The day of the meeting, Friday, stretched before me like an endless, flat plane. I tried to work from my hotel room, but the lines of code on my screen blurred into meaningless symbols. I ordered room service, but only moved the food around the plate.
My heart wasn't racing, it was beating with a slow, heavy, deliberate thud, like a drum counting down to an execution. I spent an hour choosing my outfit. This was armor, not clothing. I chose a tailored charcoal gray pantsuit from a designer so understated only other very rich people would recognize it. A simple white silk shell. My hair was pulled back in a severe, sleek ponytail. Minimal makeup. Pearl studs in my ears, a quiet, vicious echo of my mother's pearls. I stood at the window that first night, Thursday night, looking out at the familiar yet foreign skyline of my home state's capital. The anxiety I'd expected, the shaking hands, the nausea, was absent. In its place was a hyper-focused calm, the kind I got before a major product launch or a high-stakes negotiation. This was just another deal, the most personal deal of my life, but a deal nonetheless. My phone, set to Do Not Disturb except for Miranda and my attorney on the ground, Eris Thorne, buzzed once. It was a text from an unknown number with a 614 area code. "Zoe, it's Derek, Crystal's fiancé. Look, I know things are messed up. They're in a total panic over this Acheron thing. They're saying you might be involved somehow. That's crazy, right? Anyway, they're meeting with the money people tomorrow night. Your dad asked me to come for moral support. It's a mess. Just, if you know anything, can you give me a heads up? I don't want my parents dragged into this." I stared at the message. Derek, the pre-med turned doctor, the golden boy. Even his concern was self-serving. My parents. He was sniffing around the perimeter trying to protect his family's social standing from the Hartman contagion. I felt a flicker of pity for him, tethered to this sinking ship. But pity was a luxury I couldn't afford. He'd chosen his side by putting that ring on Crystal's finger. I didn't reply. Let him sweat, too. The planning with Miranda and Eris Thorne was meticulous, almost military. Eris was exactly as his name sounded, a man in his 50s with a voice like gravel rolling downhill and a demeanor that could frost glass. We had a conference call from my hotel room. "The meeting is confirmed for 7 p.m. in the private dining room, the boardroom," Eris rumbled. "I've informed the Hartman Trust that a principal from Acheron will attend. I did not provide a name or gender. I've stressed this is a courtesy, not a negotiation. They have requested your father, mother, and sister Crystal be present, along with a family advisor, likely the fiancé. I've allowed it." "Good," I said. "I want them all there. I want every witness." "Your arrival," Miranda cut in, her voice crisp through the speaker. "You should not arrive with them. Be there first. Eris, you'll be there to greet them, escort them in. Zoe will already be seated, perhaps with her back to the door initially. Let them get settled. Let them start their performance for the faceless representative. Then you turn around." The stage direction was chilling. I could picture it. The hushed, wood-paneled room, the nervous small talk, my father in his one good suit, my mother wearing her string of pearls, Crystal with her practiced, fragile smile, all of them facing the empty seat at the head of the table, waiting for the villain to arrive. And then the villain turns around, and she has my face. "What's the primary psychological goal here?" Eris asked, not unkindly. He was a strategist. He needed to understand the endgame to play his part. "The goal is not to humiliate," I said, though that would be an undeniable byproduct. "The goal is to make the abstraction real. They committed fraud against a concept, Zoe's credit, Zoe's future. I need them to see in one irreversible moment that the concept is a person who now holds the power. The shock is the delivery mechanism for the terms. They need to be too stunned to think, so they can only listen." "Understood," Eris said. "I will handle the legal formalities. You handle the familial revelations." We went over the contingencies. What if my father had a literal heart attack? We had the hotel concierge aware a doctor might be needed, and 911 on speed dial. What if they became violent? Eris was a large man, and a discreet security person would be stationed outside the door. What if they simply got up and walked out? Eris would calmly inform them that leaving would be construed as a rejection of the settlement offer, and foreclosure filings would be submitted to the county courthouse first thing Monday morning. We planned for everything, except for my own emotions, because I still wasn't sure what they would be. The day of the meeting, Friday, stretched before me like an endless flat plane. I tried to work from my hotel room, but the lines of code on my screen blurred into meaningless symbols. I ordered room service, but only moved the food around the plate. My heart wasn't racing. It was beating with a slow, heavy, deliberate thud, like a drum counting down to an execution. I spent an hour choosing my outfit. This was armor, not clothing. I chose a tailored charcoal gray pantsuit from a designer so understated only other very rich people would recognize it. A simple white silk shell. My hair was pulled back in a severe, sleek ponytail. Minimal makeup. Pearl studs in my ears. A quiet, vicious echo of my mother's pearls. I looked in the mirror. I didn't see the overlooked daughter, the scapegoat, the ghost. I saw a CEO. I saw a principal. I saw the holder of the debt. The final piece was the folder. I slid the documents inside, my fingers steady. This folder was the guillotine. I was just the executioner. At 6:15 p.m., a black town car picked me up. The drive was short. The restaurant was all dark wood, brass, and the smell of seared steak and old money. The maitre d', prepped by Eris, gave me a slight knowing nod and led me silently through the bustling main dining room to a heavy closed door at the back.
The boardroom was exactly as I'd imagined. A long, polished mahogany table, 8 high-backed leather chairs, muted landscape paintings. It smelled of lemon polish and anxiety. Eris Thorne was already there, a monolithic presence standing by the window. He turned and gave me an appraising look. "You look the part," he said, not smiling. "They're due in 15 minutes. I'll seat you here." He gestured to the chair at the head of the table, facing the door. "I'll greet them in the lobby, bring them in. I'll take this seat to your immediate right. Let me do the initial speaking. When the moment is right, you take over." I nodded, my throat suddenly too tight for words. I placed my portfolio on the table in front of me and sat down, my back to the door. I heard Eris leave, the door clicking shut with a sound of immense finality. Alone in the room, the calm I'd cultivated began to fray at the edges. The air felt thick, hard to breathe. I could hear the faint clatter of dishes, the murmur of conversations from the main room. A world of normal people having normal Friday nights. I was in a green room, waiting for the curtain to rise on the most brutal play of my life. "What are you doing?" the old conditioned voice whispered. "This is your family. You're going to destroy them. You'll never be able to take this back." I closed my eyes. I saw the notarized form with my forged signature. I heard my father's voice, "Useless failure." I saw my mother's Christmas note asking for money from her struggling daughter. I felt the phantom weight of the debt they tried to hang around my neck. The doubt evaporated, burned away by a clean, cold certainty. This wasn't destruction. This was accountability. They had built a house of cards on a foundation of lies and theft. I wasn't destroying it. I was just stopping the wind from blowing and letting gravity do what gravity does. At 6:58 p.m., I heard voices in the hall. My father's, low and tense. My mother's, a nervous flutter. Crystal's, a sharp, clipped tone. A deeper, calmer voice, Derek. And then Eris Thorne's gravelly rumble, ushering them in. "Right in here, please. The representative is waiting." The door opened. I didn't turn. I kept my gaze fixed on the empty wall before me, my posture relaxed, my hands folded on the table. I could feel their presence flood the room, a wave of nervous energy. "Mr. Thorne," my father said, his voice an octave higher than usual, "thank you for this opportunity. We appreciate Acheron Capital taking the time." "Please, be seated," Eris said, his tone devoid of warmth. I heard the shuffle of chairs, the rustle of clothing as they settled in. I imagined them arranging themselves, my parents and Crystal on one side, Derek probably next to Crystal, all of them facing the back of my chair. an audience for a star who hadn't yet turned to face them. "We've prepared a few materials," my father began, the familiar sound of him trying to control a room. "A proposal for a revised payment plan, some equity projections for the boutique." "That won't be necessary," Eris interrupting, not unkindly but with the force of a door slamming. "The principal of Acheron Capital has reviewed your file, all of it. The terms are not open for renegotiation." A stunned silence. Then my mother, her voice trembling with the effort to be charming. "But surely there must be some room for discussion. We're a family. This is our home. My daughter's business." "The principal," Eris said, emphasizing the word, "will outline your options. They are binary." Another beat of silence. I could feel their confusion, their fear beginning to curdle into desperation. This wasn't going how they'd rehearsed. The faceless financier wasn't playing ball. "Well," my father said, a hard edge returning to his voice, "can we at least meet this principal? We came here in good faith." "You are meeting her," Eris said. And then, directly to me, he delivered the line we'd rehearsed. "Miss Hartman, they're ready." The use of my name was the trigger. I took a deep, silent breath. This was it, the point of no return. I slowly, smoothly swiveled the high-backed leather chair around to face the table. Time didn't freeze. It shattered. My father was mid-sentence, his mouth still open around a word that died. The color drained from his face so completely he looked like a black-and-white photograph. His eyes bulged, uncomprehending, then filling with a dawning, horrific understanding. My mother made a small, choked sound, like a mouse caught in a trap. Her hand flew to her pearls. Her eyes, wide and terrified, darted from my face to Eris's and back again, seeking some explanation, some proof this was a cruel joke. Crystal's reaction was the most visceral. She jerked back, as if electrocuted, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "What?" she gasped. Then louder, "What the fuck?" Her face, usually so carefully composed, was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage and shock. "Zoe? What is this? What are you doing here?" Derek just stared, his doctor's composure utterly gone, his face a blank slate of confusion. I let the silence hang, let the image of me, calm, poised, in control, sear itself into their retinas. I met each of their gazes, one by one. My father's shock, my mother's terror, Crystal's fury, Derek's bewilderment. Then I spoke. My voice was calm, clear, and carried in the tomb-like quiet of the room. It didn't sound like my voice. It sounded like the voice of Acheron Capital. "Hello," I said. "I am Zoe Hartman, principal and managing member of Acheron Capital Partners. As of January 10th, Acheron is the legal owner of the defaulted loan originally issued to the Hartman Family Trust. You've been speaking with our counsel, Mr. Thorne." The words were simple. Their meaning was cataclysmic. My father found his voice first. It was a ragged, broken thing. "Zoe, this is a trick. This is some kind of sick joke." "It's not a joke, Robert," I said, using his first name. The shift was deliberate, a massive one. I was not speaking to my father. I was speaking to a debtor. The transaction is a matter of public record. The loan, including your personal guarantee, the one with the forged signature, was purchased by my company for cash. The word forged hit the room like a physical blow. My mother flinched. Crystal's rage faltered, replaced by a flicker of panic. "Forged? That's a lie," my father blustered, but the force was gone. It was the reflex of a cornered man. "The notary's log places her at a truck stop 50 miles away on the date in question. Her testimony, along with digital evidence proving Ms. Hartman was in Italy, has already been compiled. We could pursue criminal charges for fraud and forgery. We have chosen, thus far, to treat this as a civil matter. That could change." The threat, delivered in that deadpan rumble, sucked the remaining air from the room.
criminal charges. The words hung there, ugly and real. My mother found her voice, a shrill, desperate weapon. So what? You bought our debt to get back at us? For Thanksgiving? This is because Daddy hurt your feelings? You're going to make us homeless over a fight? I turned my gaze to her. It was like aiming a spotlight. This isn't about Thanksgiving, Crystal. This is about the fact that you and our parents secured using a forgery of my signature. This is about the fact that you committed a felony, and then, when it started to collapse, you called me a useless failure and asked me for $50,000. This is about you using my name, my financial standing, as your secret safety net, while you told everyone in town I was couch surfing in Seattle. I spoke evenly, without heat, stating facts. Each fact was a brick, building a wall between the past and the present. You were struggling, my mother whispered, tears starting to stream down her face. We were worried about you. We were trying to protect you from embarrassment. I own a 3,000 square foot loft on the Seattle waterfront, Mother. The title Mother feeling strange and formal on my tongue. My net worth is in the 9 figures. The only embarrassment is the one you manufactured to make yourselves feel better about stealing from me. The numbers, spoken aloud in this context, were a different kind of shock. Their vision of me, the struggling, unstable loser, collided violently with the reality of the woman in the suit stating obscene wealth as a simple fact. The cognitive dissonance was almost painful to watch. My father put his head in his hands. What do you want, Zoe? Just what do you want? Finally, the question. I opened the leather portfolio. I didn't slide the papers across. I held them. Acheron Capital wants its investment repaid with interest, as per the terms of the note you signed. You have 2 options. Option 1, you secure financing and pay the full sum of $434,817.19 within 30 days. Given the forgery and default, I suspect traditional lenders will be unavailable. You know we can't do that, Crystal spat. Option 2, I continued, as if she hadn't spoken, you voluntarily deed the collateral properties, the family home at 2147 Willow Lane and the commercial unit at 2151 Willow Lane to Acheron Capital in lieu of foreclosure. This would satisfy the debt, though you may be responsible for any shortfall if the properties appraise for less. You want to take our house? My mother wailed, her performance now fully genuine. The house I raised you in. You want to take your sister's business? I don't want to, I said, and for the first time a sliver of my own emotion showed, not anger, but a profound, weary truth. You brought this to my doorstep. These are the consequences of the choices you made, the fraud you committed. I let that sink in. The room was silent, except for my mother's stifled sobs. However, I said, and I saw a flicker of hopeless, pathetic hope in my father's eyes as he looked up. As the controlling member of Acheron Capital, I have the discretion to offer a third path, a settlement. This is not from your daughter. This is a business decision from your creditor. I laid out the terms of option C, the one Miranda and I had crafted to be just barely palatable, a lifeboat with a slow leak. You have 1 week to list the house for sale. The proceeds from the sale will go directly to Acheron Capital to retire the debt. Any remaining balance after the sale will be forgiven. You will be responsible for all realtor fees, taxes, and closing costs. Sell the house? My father breathed. Concurrently, Crystal's closet will cease operations immediately. The commercial space will also be listed for sale or lease. All inventory is to be liquidated. The boutique is done. No! Crystal shrieked, standing up so fast her chair toppled over behind her. You can't. It's my dream. It's everything. It was built on a fraudulent loan, Crystal, I said, my voice cutting through her scream. It never existed. It was a fantasy you funded with a crime. She stood there, trembling, looking to her parents for support. But they were shells, staring at the table, comprehending the scale of the ruin. If you agree to these terms, I concluded, you can use whatever money is left from the house sale after the debt is cleared to find a new place to live. You will be free of the debt, and you will be free of me. I will have no further financial or personal connection to any of you. That is the offer. It expires in 48 hours. The finality of it, free of me, the thing they'd seemingly always wanted, now offered as the only shred of mercy, and it tasted like ashes. "And if we don't agree?" my father asked, his voice hollow. Eris Thorne answered, "Then on Monday morning we file for immediate judicial foreclosure and publicly record the lis pendens. The lawsuit will include the forgery allegations. The story of the Hartman Family Trust's fraud will become a matter of public record, accessible to anyone, including the local news, Derek's Parents Country Club, and every future employer or creditor you might ever have. You will lose the properties anyway, but you will also lose your reputations, and you will still owe any shortfall." It was checkmate, and they knew it. I stood up, gathering my portfolio. The movement seemed to jolt them. I looked at them, my family, now just 3 broken people and a stunned bystander in a too-quiet room that smelled of steak and despair. "You have my attorney's contact information," I said. "He will receive your decision." I didn't say goodbye. I just turned and walked toward the door. Eris fell into step beside me. Just as my hand touched the brass doorknob, my father spoke. Not a shout, a broken whisper, filled with a confusion so deep it was almost childlike. "Zoe, why? Why would you do this to your family?" I stopped. I didn't turn back. I stared at the grain of the wooden door. "You did it to yours first, Dad," I said softly. Then I opened the door and walked out, leaving the wreckage of their perfect picture behind me. The silence after I left the Capitol Grill was the most profound I have ever experienced. It wasn't the quiet of my Seattle loft. That was a peaceful, chosen silence. This was the silence of a vacuum, of a universe holding its breath. Eris Thorne walked me to the waiting town car, his expression unreadable. "You handled that with remarkable composure," he said, as the driver held the door open. It was a textbook execution. "Thank you," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Let me know the moment you hear from them." "Of course." The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the warm, deceptive glow of the restaurant behind. I didn't look back. I leaned my head against the cool window, watching the streetlights blur into streaks of gold. My body was still, but inside, a reactor was winding down from peak output. The adrenaline that had fueled me, cold, clean, and efficient, was receding, and in its wake, a deep, bone-aching fatigue began to seep in. But there was no regret, no second-guessing, just the hollow, resonant echo of a door slamming shut forever. Back in my hotel suite, I changed out of my armor-like suit into soft sweatpants and a hoodie. I ordered a pot of tea from room service, but my hands were steady as I poured it. The shaking, the emotional collapse I'd half expected didn't come. Instead, I felt empty, scoured clean. The ghost had finally been seen, and in being seen, it had vanished. My phone, predictably, was a war zone. Missed calls from all 3 of them, cascading voicemail notifications, a torrent of texts that ranged from pleading to vicious. I didn't listen. I didn't read. I simply powered it off and set it on the dresser. The next 48 hours belonged to Eris Thorne. I flew back to Seattle the next morning. The flight felt like crossing a boundary, not just in space, but in time. I was leaving the old world, the world of Zoe the failure, in the smoking crater I'd created. I was returning to my life, my real life, but I knew it would be different. The poison was finally being cut out. Miranda called me as my car pulled up to my building.
My heiress just called. They've been on the phone with him all morning. A lot of crying, a lot of shouting, a lot of how could she, but no substantive arguments. They have no legal leg to stand on, and they know it. And? I asked, my key hovering at the lock. And, Miranda said, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice, they've agreed to everything. The sale of the house, the shuttering of the boutique. They signed the settlement term sheet electronically an hour ago. It's over. The word over landed with a physical weight. I pushed open my door, the familiar open space of my loft welcoming me. The sun was breaking through the Seattle clouds, casting long, sharp beams across the polished concrete floor. It's not quite over, I said, leaning against the doorframe. There's the sale, the move, the fallout. The mechanics are just mechanics now. Acheron Capital will oversee the listing through a property manager. The terms are ironclad. If they deviate, we proceed with foreclosure. The leverage is all ours. You can be as hands-off as you want. That's exactly what I wanted. To be a ghost again, but this time by choice. A silent, unseen force of accountability. The following weeks were a strange, passive vigil. I received weekly reports from the property management company Acheron had hired. The house at 2147 Willow Lane was listed at a competitive price. The photos, which I forced myself to look at once, were surreal. There was the living room where I'd been called a useless failure, the kitchen where my mother had penned her pathetic note, my old bedroom, now a generic guest room, stripped of any trace of me. It was just a house now, a very nice, soon-to-be-sold house. The reports noted that my parents were cooperative but despondent. Crystal's boutique, Crystal's closet, had a going-out-of-business sale that lasted a weekend. The report dryly noted that inventory liquidation proceeds were negligible. I heard snippets through the fragile grapevine of my past. Sarah, my old high school friend, texted me again, her tone odd and confused. Hey, so I heard your parents are selling the house, and Crystal's boutique closed? Everyone is talking. They're saying it's because of some huge loan that fell through. Your mom told my mom it was all a big misunderstanding with the bank, but she looks older. Is everything okay? I wrote back simply, everything is finally being resolved. Thanks for checking in. I didn't elaborate. Let the town talk, let them speculate. The truth, the forgery, the fraud, my role, would likely never reach them. My family would cling to the big misunderstanding with the bank story until their dying day. The house sold faster than expected. The market was good and the property was desirable. The closing statement arrived via encrypted email from Miranda. The sale price, minus realtor fees, taxes, and the remaining debt to Acheron Capital left a sum of just under $85,000. $85,000 from the equity in my childhood home, the home they'd almost lost because they tried to steal from me. According to the settlement, that money was theirs to find a new place. Miranda included a note. Per the agreement, the funds have been wired to your parents' account. The debt is satisfied in full. Acheron Capital's interest is terminated. The matter is legally closed. Closed. I printed the email. I didn't frame it or burn it. I filed it away in a drawer with my passport and birth certificate, just another important document. I allowed myself one moment of curiosity. Using a private browser, I looked up real estate listings in their old zip code. A few weeks later, I found it. A small, tidy townhouse in a development 15 minutes away. It was listed as sold. The photos showed beige carpets, a small kitchen with outdated appliances, a postage stamp backyard, a massive downsize, a crushing come-down from the sprawling, picture-perfect colonial on Willow Lane. That was their new reality. Not destitution, not the streets, as my father had so casually condemned me to, but a reality, a life sized to fit their actual means, not the inflated, fraudulent fantasy they'd been living. I never heard from them directly again. No calls, no letters, no final attempts at guilt. The silence from Ohio was now permanent, and this time it didn't feel like neglect. It felt like peace, the peace of a debt collected, a boundary finally, ferociously enforced. My own life didn't change dramatically on the surface. I still worked, I still enjoyed my view, I still had dinners with friends who knew nothing of the quiet war I'd just won.
But inside, the change was tectonic. The constant, low-grade anxiety of being misunderstood, the similan resentment, the need to prove myself to an audience that refused to look, it was gone, evaporated. I had proven everything, not to them, but to myself, and I had done it on the most brutally objective terms possible, the law and money. About 6 months after the sale, I was having drinks with Miranda, who had become a true friend through the ordeal. We were at a quiet bar, and she asked me the question I knew was coming. "Do you ever wonder about them, how they're doing?" I swirled the ice in my glass. Sometimes, in the way you might wonder about a natural disaster you read about in the news. You feel a distant pang, but you're just glad you weren't in the path of it. "And the revenge?" she pressed, her lawyer's eyes missing nothing. "Did it feel good?" I thought about it. The moment in the boardroom, watching their faces fracture, the power of holding the documents, the clean surgical cut of the settlement. It didn't feel good in the way happiness feels good. It felt necessary. It felt like finally pulling a rotten tooth. There's a shock, a gaping hole, a lot of blood. It's traumatic, but the chronic, debilitating pain is gone. The infection is gone. So no, not good, but right. It felt right. She nodded, understanding. "And the price?" I smiled, a real, unburdened smile. "A few $100,000 in legal and acquisition fees. A pittance. The best money I've ever spent. It bought me my life back." That's the truth of it. This story isn't about a spectacular, fiery revenge that left them in the gutter. It's about a reclamation. They tried to take my future, my name, my credit, my peace. So I took it all back, and in the process, I took away the illusions their own futures were built on. The golden child's boutique? Gone. The picture-perfect family home? Sold. The reputation as the perfect, successful family? Shattered, at least in their own minds. They have to live now in the smaller house, with the quieter life, knowing exactly how they got there. Knowing that the daughter they dismissed and betrayed was the architect of their downsizing. That is their life sentence. Not poverty, but the relentless, quiet knowledge. As for me, I am free. The silence is no longer something they impose on me. It's something I cherish. The peace isn't the absence of war, it's the secure knowledge that the war is over, and I won by refusing to play by their rules. I built my own game, on my own board, with my own pieces, and I checkmated them with a move they never saw coming. So, if you're out there, and you're the overlooked one, the scapegoat, the ghost in your own family, if you're doing everything right and still getting screwed, if you feel stuck and powerless, hear this: you are not alone. The day you stop being a doormat isn't the day you scream, it's the day you get very, very quiet and you start to build your own leverage. It's the day you realize that the best revenge isn't rage, it's success, it's peace, it's walking away not in defeat, but in victory, leaving them to the consequences of the world they tried to build on your back. You're allowed to protect yourself. You're allowed to walk away. And sometimes walking away means first walking right into the center of their world, looking them in the eye and showing them the bill for every single thing they ever took. They called me a useless failure, so I became the lender of last resort, and I called their loan. So, what do you think? Did they get the harsh reality check they deserved, or was forcing them to sell the family home a step too far? Could you have walked away without looking back, or would you have done something different? Let me know in the comments. And if you believe that sometimes the quietest people are the ones you should never ever underestimate, hit that subscribe button. There are more stories of silent strength and stunning consequences where this one came from. Thanks for listening.